Okay, welcome back. This is the second video of the series that I'm doing. The first video we did how to clean all your brass and the different types of things you can use to clean your brass. And in this video it's going to be all about resizing and case preparation. So basically we need to resize all our brass, which is going to make it as long as it possibly will be, and then from that we can determine whether it needs to be trimmed or not. So there's different methods to resizing: lube versus non-lube, carbide dies versus steel dies. Carbide definitely the way to go if you can get away with it. That way you don't have to use a lube. But some calibers, they don't offer the carbide dies, so you got to use the lube. So in this video I'm going to do 9mm because I've already got it set up on my Lyman press here. So we'll resize some 9, and then we'll determine whether they need to be trimmed or not. So let me get that set up and we'll get started. Okay, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to do 9mm, I'm going to do 223, seeing as that's when you got to use a lube with. And at this time, this is the Lyman T-Mag 2 turret press. It's what I started out on. It's basically got all your dies set up in it, and then you just rotate it to whatever station you need. So I had the 9mm on this one, so I just wanted to show you how easy it is to change these turrets out, and this is why I recommend the turret press versus just the regular single stage, because that way you ain't got to keep readjusting the dies every time you got to switch out different dies. So all this has is a center lug that holds it on. So basically we'll take that out. You just hang that up on your wall or whatever, and then whatever other turret you have set up, basically just screw that back on there. And it's that easy to switch calibers. So I just wanted to show you that real quick, and I've got my 223 die on this one here, so let's get started with that. Okay, now that we're all set up, I got my brass here, 223, and even though it is a carbide sizing die, you're still going to need to use lube because it's such a long case, and you don't want to run the risk of the case getting stuck inside your die. So a couple different ways you can lube them up. You can get a pad like this and then use a resizing lube. Smear some on your pad, work it around with your finger, and then run your brass through it. What I typically do is I'll fill up a Tupperware like this with a bunch of brass, and then you can get a spray lube and you just spray it on there, and that works well, and that's what I usually use. I will use this also, and I'll do like every 10th case. That way it lubes up inside your die and everything. So these are all lubed up, and we'll stick them on there, and we'll run it up into the die, and that's gonna de-prime it as well as resize that case back to factory dimensions. Okay, so we're gonna do all of these. And all those cases are, like I said, back to factory dimensions, and the primers had been removed. So I'm going to clean these cases up by hand with a towel real quick. At this time, normally I would bring them back downstairs and run all of my cases back through the SS media tumbler. That will remove all the lube, and don't forget that black polishing compound that's in the corncob media from the very first step. It'll get that all cleaned off as well. Your primers are no longer in there, so it'll clean out your primer pockets, and it'll get all the carbon out of the inside of your cases. So let me clean these off, and then we'll move on to determining whether they need to be trimmed or not. Okay, one thing I'd like to add is in the last step, safety first always. So there's a lot of carbon and stuff all over those cases, and lead, and so I usually use latex glove when I'm doing a couple hundred. I'll resize a couple hundred of them at a time. So always use safety. You don't want to get overexposure to lead and all the harmful, contaminants of reloading. So that being said, a couple different ways you can determine whether your brass needs to be trimmed. One, you can get a set of calipers and then put each piece of brass in there and determine whether it needs to be trimmed or not. or you can use a case gauge. I use the case gauge, it's a lot quicker. Always consult your manuals, get all your data correct. Trim to length on 223 is 1.750. So that being said, all you do is you take your piece of brass, you put it in your case gauge, hold it with your finger on the bottom, and then you'll see it sticking out on the top here. There's two different shelves on this case gauge, a high or a step and a low step. And what you're going to do is just run your fingernail across there and see if it catches on that brass. If it does catch on the brass going across the high step, that you know that brass is sticking above it, and then that would need to be trimmed. So that one's above the high step. That one there, I cannot grab onto it with my fingernail across the high step, but I can with the low step. Okay, so that one's in between the two shelves or the steps, so that's the proper length. You don't need to trim that one. And that one is proper as well. And that one, you can hear it catching above the high step. So I got two pieces of brass that need to be trimmed out of these four, and two that are of the proper length. So at this point, basically you're separating your brass, put all these into a bucket that need to be trimmed, put these all in a bucket that are okay, and then if they're lower than the low step, obviously that brass is too short, I would discard it and not use it. So a couple different ways you can trim this brass. Let me get that stuff set up and we'll go over that. Okay, with that, in that last video there, the case gauge would also be used at the very end when you're all done with your product. You would stick your case into that case gauge, and what that does is this is the same exact dimensions as the inside of your chamber. So when you put that case in there and it's perfectly flush with the end of this, you know that you're going to have no problems with that round chambering in the weapon that you're using. So just wanted to add that. This is what I use to trim my brass. This is the Lyman Universal Case Trimmer, and it's got all these pilots that it comes with for all the different calibers. And all you would do is you would stick your piece of brass in there like so, make your adjustments here to determine how much it's going to trim it, and then you just turn it like this and it'll cut off whatever brass is excess. Okay, and you would do that for each of your cases. This trimmer, you can do it with primers in it or without the primers in it, because this end of the trimmer does not use the primer pocket to hold the piece of brass. Okay, just wanted to add that because some trimmers you can't do it with the primers in there. So you have this crank one. You can also get this option that you can put in it, and that allows you to use a drill, an electric drill on the end, and that's normally what I use when I used to use this. What I've gone to is the World's Finest Trimmer. It's from Little Crow Gunworks, and this one here is an older one. It's caliber specific. You can see it's made for 223, and all you do is use this adjusting screw. You loosen that up, and then that bit inside will be able to move, and you can get it to exactly where you need it. You would chuck this up in a drill, and then all you do is take your brass and push it in the end until it stops going in as the drill's going, and that will trim it right to the proper length. This is super quick. That's what I use now. Makes it a lot more enjoyable and rather than tedious, using this type of setup here. So I'm not going to resize these. I already have stuff that we're going to use for the next step. So now that our brass has been all trimmed, then my next step would be to clean up the edge here where you trimmed it. You need to deburr it inside and outside, and then also take care of your primer pocket. So I'll get it set up for that next step, and we'll take care of that. Alright, so all our brass is to the proper length. The next step is to cleaning up, like I said, deburring the inside and outside of the case mouth, and then taking care of your primer pocket. I use a lot of Lyman products because they're really affordable, and in my opinion they're very good quality, and a lot of Lyman products have features that other ones do not have. So again, form your own opinion, make your own conclusions, and then purchase whatever you think would work best for you. So this is the Lyman Case Prep Express. It's got 5 spinning heads on here, and these are all removable. You just spin them off. You can configure it any way you want. This first one here, it does the, let me move this up a little bit so you can see it. This one here will make the flash hole all consistent. It's a little drill bit, and you make the adjustments on this part here, and you just basically slide that down till it stops, and that little drill bit will cut through the flash hole and make it uniform. This one's set up for 9 mil, so obviously it would go down to like that far. This is the inside deburring tool. You just basically run your brass over it. It'll take all the little sharp edges off on the inside. I got the outside deburring tool on this station, and this one here will remove the military crimp, and this little one here will trim all the primer pockets to a consistent depth. Basically, reloading, it's all about uniformity in order to get consistency. So let me turn this on so you can just hear how it sounds. It's not very loud. And then basically, like I said, I would do the inside, the outside, and that makes that all nice around the case mouth. If this had a military crimp, you would run it on there, and it's going to bottom out in the primer pocket, so you can keep it on there as long as you want. It's not going to hurt anything. That'll get rid of the military crimp, and then this one here will trim out anything in the bottom of the flash or the primer hole there, make them all a consistent depth. So if you have a military crimp on here, you can run it on the inside deburring tool, and that's going to get most of it off. And then you can use this one here and then this one here, and that will remove the military crimp. I use a Swager to do that. So let me get that set up and I'll show you how that works really quick. Okay, this is the Super Swager 600 by Dylan, and all this is a little rod here that you stick your brass over. Put it down like that, and then just push this handle, and it's going to remount that flash or the primer pocket. My opinion is the less brass you can take off a piece of brass, the better. When you're trimming and you're using the Case Prep Express, it's grinding out brass to get rid of that military crimp. This method here, it's just going to squish things and reform and make that primer pocket the way size it should be without the military crimp. So this here is really quick. You can blast through 100 cases in no time at all, and this is what I prefer to use. All these steps, a lot of them you only got to do the first time. After you fire these once or twice or whatever, you don't need to do this step again. You don't need to really take care of the primer pocket again. So this is basically for virgin brass, or if you purchase once fired brass off of the internet, you'd want to do all these steps just to make sure that they're right for you. So that's the Super Swage 600, and with that, let's go on to the next step. Okay, that's the end of the second video. Basically at this point we're all set to prime our cases, charge them, seat the bullet, so on and so forth. I just want to point out again that it does not have to be an expensive process. You can get starter kits that got the basics in them, and that's enough to produce a round to go down range. You can, I got the Case Prep Express, which is all automated, but I mean you can get tools like this, that inside deburring tool and outside deburring tool, and inside this it's got the military crimp remover and a couple other bits, and you just use it by hand. It does just as good of a job. It's a lot cheaper, and then as you go on through this process and you save up money, buy certain other things that maybe make it a little easier to you. My opinion is I'd rather spend a lot more time shooting than I do reloading. If I'm spending 2 hours to make 100 rounds and only 100 or an hour to shoot that 100 rounds, I think it needs to kind of be the other way around. A half hour to produce 100 rounds and then an hour to shoot it. So that's just my theory on it. So this next video is going to be about priming our cases and then charging our cases, and we'll go over the different types of equipment that I use for those two steps.